Probably the biggest thing they've done in either season at this point. Massive, massive changes to the dungeons, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on them, and we're going to talk about how I feel about all this stuff. So I just want to start with that part of it specifically because if you had followed my discussion in season one, you know that I was pretty disappointed with how imbalanced the dungeons were apart from each other. Like if you looked at Shadow Moon Barrow Ground versus like Knockout Defense or something like that, I felt like there was like multiple key levels of difference between them. This season, I do not feel like that at all. Obviously, Underrot is still looked at as one of the easier dungeons, but it's not like Shadow Moon, not even close. Shadow Moon was like pretty much no fail mode. You'd really have to be AFK at parts of that dungeon to fail. There was some hard bosses, but for the most part, it was very, very easy. I think Underrot's just simply undertuned. Like the trash in there does almost nothing. But the bosses are still very dangerous. Really, other than the first one, all of them are dangerous. The first one's like one of the easiest bosses ever. Not quite to the level of the bosses in Shadow Moon, though. But yeah, not nothing really comparable. No problems like that. That's really it. It's not like it was in season one. So I was a lot happier with season two. And season two like had better changes early, but then they just stopped entirely. Like there was like a bunch of changes for 3 weeks, and they didn't do a thing since really. Now they did some really small stuff, but like yeah, this is the level of change that you would expect to see. And ironically, I'm like 99% on this, but ironically, it's the exact same timeline that had happened in season one. It was week 8 when I published the video. I don't actually know, exactly when the changes came or whatever, but it was week 8 of season one where they made the massive changes in season one as well. And it's week 8 right now in season two. So it was very interesting. Maybe there's something to learn from that, but regardless, here it is. Okay. Immature Venom Sac no longer works in any content. I have no idea how that even got through. It makes me wonder if it got like usually something like this just shares a potion cooldown, because there's already things in the game that can remove poisons and stuff like that, like the loofah trinket and all that stuff. Usually that stuff has either a minimum level or some kind of potion cooldown, so you can't use it too frequently. But yeah, this was actually just trivializing the Neuraxes fight. If you guys saw the Wowhead article, as soon as Wowhead makes a post on that, that kind of stuff gets changed. Yeah, I think there's probably like a threshold where Blizzard's like, well, it's like a couple dozen players are doing it right now. And then all of a sudden it's like a couple dozen thousands of players are doing it. So then they have to take action. But anyway, here's the boss changes for Brackenhide. These are massive. Gash Frenzy's periodic damage has been reduced by 25%. Now, there's a video coming. It was going to come today, but I'm pushing it now because of this. Where, yeah, people are struggling on that fight. And that's really the main difficulty of that boss. Like, it's that right there. It's such a painful bleed. So a 25% nerf to that seems quite big to me. Now, a very interesting change to the final boss. Withered Eruption damage is reduced, which is nice. That is usually not, at least in the keys I've been doing, usually not that dangerous. Only if you fail to kill the totem, though. If you fail to kill the totem, then the Withered Eruption is probably going to kill somebody. And so I had been talking about this dungeon being the easiest like of the season, even ahead of Underrot, and I still feel that it is because the timer is insanely loose. There's so much trash you can skip and so much trash you can pull that it's really feels like you can do whatever you want in this dungeon. But people were like, no, not on higher Tyrannicals, like above even where I'm at 22. They're talking about 24 maybe. That totem is unkillable. That's what I heard. Totem is unkillable. I was like, well, that's going to be a problem because it's not even remotely unkillable in the key levels I'm doing. So it just kind of gets to the threshold where it's just like theoretically DPS can't meet that number in that amount of time. So very smart solution from Blizzard. Instead of nerfing the totem again, I think they nerfed it at least once, if not maybe 2 or 3 times. Instead, they just made the cast take longer. Genius, really, because now it doesn't need to die faster. You have 2 extra seconds to kill it before the cast goes off. I guess it's pretty rudimentary, but I don't know why they didn't do that in the first place. So this is a really good choice, I think, and it's going to solve that problem that we were just talking about. Halls of Infusion, not really the change I expected to see, frankly. The thing I am really disappointed with for Watcher Iridius is that middle phase, that phase with the balls that come in. You have very little time to kill them before the stacks get really high. We were talking about that a couple weeks ago, and I still think the right choice here is to nerf the rate at which the balls or which the stacks are acquired. I don't exactly know how. I think it's just based on seconds that you're in that phase or something. That should be what they changed. But instead, they made this only on 2 people instead of 3. And then they nerfed the dot damage. Now I've been asking, especially since I tried, a little foray into healing there, what the hard part of that fight is for players. Everybody tells me it's about running out and running back through that puddle. So, if that's true, then this doesn't necessarily change that. And in fact, I don't think this actually helps the fight at all, right? Because it doesn't matter how many people there are with the debuff. It's only a nerf to groups who don't have the mass dispel. Because then you're only going to have it on one person. You'll dispel it. Presumably the healer will dispel it from himself. Or I don't think it really matters. But it is a DPS gain because if you do it that way, then you do not need 3 people to run out. But the way it's being done with Shadow Priest, this doesn't change a single thing, I don't think, right? Like, I don't know what the periodic damage thing is reducing, but I assume it's simply talking about this. Because the spell that is dispelled then says Power Field. And I assume Power Field is the dangerous part when you're running through the puddle. So this is not nerfing Power Field, so this does nothing. This is a terrible change in my eyes. Everything else is a pretty substantial and successful change. But this, it's like, wow, really? Because I feel like this is the hardest boss in the game right now. It really does feel like that boss is the only one that's actually overtuned. And it's just not what I would have expected. So that's disappointing to me. But anyway, Nelthera trash. They're buffing or nerfing the trash. I don't actually know what the commander is or where you fight this mob, but the other 2 mobs totally agree they have too much health. I was thinking that when it was bolstering week. It's like these mobs have like twice the health of the mobs in the pack. Luckily, bolstering was nerfed, so it just didn't matter. But yeah, it was very obvious that those have too much health. I would definitely not say 11% is the right nerf for that, but hey, it doesn't really matter. Presumably, all 3 of those mobs cannot be hit by the chains. The wardens are the ones or the lava bearers are the ones that you can actually snap downward, I believe. So if you're still doing that, then that at least, the chain hits that one. But anyway, Magma Tusk, massive, pretty much everything on the fight was nerfed. The periodic damage, his health was reduced. Lava Wave, 14%, Lava Spray, 21%, and Magma Lob now fires a pull every 6.5 seconds. I like that they're doing these like mechanical tunings as well, not just numerical tunings. They're also making the mechanics happen less frequently. Now, this is all data mining. I assume that this is not incorrect in any way. Typically, though, when there's just data mining, I think it's because Blizzard's not like finished. You know what I mean? Like if they were 100%, they would tell us about some of this stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised because this came out on a Friday. So I wouldn't be surprised if this ends up not being the complete list. But they nerfed the hell out of Magma Tusk, which again, listen, all you got to do is make it so the charge doesn't one-shot you. That's pretty much it, because the rest of the fight is not hard. I don't feel like this fight is hard at all. It's not even close to the hardest fight in this dungeon. And these things are just inconsequential. I mean, you got to be, like, to die to one of these things, your healers just got to not be able to keep up, right? So, yeah, I don't know. It's a big change. One way or the other fight's going to be very, very easy now, I think. Forge Master Gorek. Health reduced by 10%. All 3 bosses on the list have been reduced by 10% health. This boss is, again, this is probably the hardest one in here. But again, really straightforward fight. It's just a numerical race, so this one makes a lot more sense to nerf. The Blazing Hammer, I assume that is the AoE damage, right? Yeah. Yep. So that's a big nerf, 20% to that. So that fight's literally, when I tried it on my Druid, I got one shot. Like, not one shot because he hits it 3 times. But if I did not heal myself a bunch throughout that, it would just kill me on a fortified key. So that's a high damaging ability. Last boss as well. Health reduced by 10% and the dot damage from the Molten Gold, which again, I really don't feel like this fight is hard to heal. It seems like one of the easier fights in here. It's just a lot of health. So this is definitely one that you like seeing that 10% nerf. Now, Notherin's Lair, this is like a completely inconsequential change, but I guess it was bugged because I've seen people die to this. In fact, it happened just the other day on stream. Somebody complained that they died to the acid splatter or whatever. I see people like walk through this all the time, and it's just like weird how much damage it does. So yeah, that was probably just bugged the whole time. I don't know why I was doing so much damage, but now that they did that, it's probably just not really going to ever impact anybody. But at least it's something that should have been done the whole time. But buffs or nerfs to the other 2 fights in here are surprising to me because Again, these fights, I don't know, like Rock Morris, crystalline ground damage reduced by 25%. That's a mechanic that you're supposed to be standing still for. Now, of course, it's hard to do that, and some affixes make it harder, but that is really not the hard part of the fight. Again, um, it's just like well, in a pug world, I'm playing with different people, so whatever. That's probably a fight that is very, very easy if you have a coordinated group who all switches to the ads accurately. But this one, obviously, Toxic Wretch, huge, huge damage buff to this, or damage nerf to this. This one's definitely probably the biggest change in the game this season. These ones are big, but they're just not needed. I feel like Magma Tusk does not need a damage nerf, but this fight definitely does, and it's definitely getting one, so that's big. Now, Uldaman, you guys have probably recognized that this dungeon was very difficult as well to Tyrannical Week. Earthen Shards, that is that bleed that everybody's been complaining about on the Snake boss. And then this dungeon, this boss in this dungeon has not been nerfed.
On the guy.
Instead, they just changed the visual of the mechanic that was already easy to dodge. But now it's way, 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 way easier to see. But yeah, this was not really needed, honestly. So again, they needed to change the dot just like they did on this boss, but they didn't. So that one's kind of disappointing, but I don't, as a tank, it doesn't matter at all to me. Anyway, Underrot, another change to the trash mob. I'm 99% sure this is the worm, right? Yes, the giant worm. And Dark Echoes has had its cast time lowered, which is constantly getting off. I see this constantly get off because everybody tries to interrupt the regular spell, like the other spell, and then this one doesn't end up having an interrupt up, so this one's pretty dangerous. And in the consequential segment of this is not necessarily that the cast time is longer. What they're doing there is giving you more time to react to it, but it's also giving you that split second for the first interrupt to be back up, which happens all the time. I see it's almost just back up, and then we end up taking a tick of it. You know what I mean? Anyway, and then Vortex Pinnacle, Skyfall Nova. So probably the most nerfed thing I've ever seen in Mythic Plus. This mob, this ad has been nerfed. Now it's had its damage reduced. I think they nerfed the health like 3 times, and then they nerfed the damage probably at least once before this. And it's probably still going to be too much, but it doesn't even really matter because, again, if everybody switches to it, it's pretty straightforward. So yeah, I'm happy with this, and I want to praise them. I want to say like, hey man, if you can keep tuning the dungeons properly, then you will have a good concept here. But like I said, in season 1, I did not have a lot of confidence in this concept of rotating dungeons. And this is why, because it took them 8 weeks to do these changes. So, when you make changes 8 weeks into a season, a lot of people gave up already, man. You know what I mean? A lot of people are gone. They're not coming back. This is way too long for some of these changes. You know what I mean? Like some of these bosses were clearly not working well. Gashtooth and Neuraxes, these were not in really acceptable states on Tyrannical. Tyrannical is way too hard, and I don't think these are going to solve the problems with Tyrannical, but it is a very good start. And it's probably going to be the only thing that does happen, but obviously Neltharis, Tyrannical, considerably harder than Fortified, so this was a good choice to lower the health of all the bosses. This dungeon, I think, is trending to be one of the easiest dungeons in the game. Like every time there's changes, it's targeting Neltharis. So anyway, let me know what you guys think about this. Do you think Tyrannical is like a whole key? I've been saying it's like a whole keystone level harder. Do you think Blizzard is acting quick enough? Do you think that they are acting commensurate to their idea here where they're rotating dungeons out every 20 weeks? Is this working out? Do you guys think so? I think as long as they continue to make changes, they've made good changes in the beginning of the season. I guess this week 8 thing has some significance, maybe some internal thing that we don't understand. Like maybe this is when they start the MDI bullshit, whatever that is. I don't know. Who knows? I don't see it all anymore, but usually there's a pattern. And if it's going to develop like this regularly, it's probably for a reason. So thank you for watching. We'll see you guys in the next video.